For me, the idea that I could help women who have built these incredible lifestyle businesses, including creator businesses, and help them turn them into life-changing assets, then I've accomplished my goal.
Welcome back to the SheSpeaks Influence Effect podcast. I have a great episode to share with you today. We have on the wonderful Carrie Kerpen, and I need to start by saying my connection to Carrie actually goes back well before she and I sat down for this interview to a show that I watched many years ago, a reality TV show called Paradise Hotel. Carrie's husband, Dave Kerpen, was on the show. He made it all the way to the end. And at the twist at the end, his partner, this woman he helped get all the way through to the end of the show, was given the choice to share the money with him or to take it all for herself. Well, she chose the latter, but out of that, we got this amazing company that Dave and Carrie formed together. I won't do it justice, so I'm going to let you hear how Carrie talks about the company called Likeable Media that she and Dave founded as one of the first social media agencies back in the day. Carrie helped build this company up. She ended up selling the company. She had an exit and now helps other women kind of realize that dream of building something and getting to an exit. Her new venture is called the Whisper Group. I think this episode is really interesting for anyone who or has some sort of side interest or even a main business that they're looking to build. There is some amazing advice in this podcast episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's a terrific episode. I'm going to let you hear it. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We were just chatting before we got started. We've known each other a long time. We've sort of been in the same circles, but I think this might be probably one of the first times we're actually kind of chatting one-on-one. So I have tracked your career. It's so exciting to see the things you've done. I am excited to have you on the show today. And we're going to start by going way back because I remember a lot of your story. So you started your company, Likeable Media, with your husband, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Dave was on a reality show called Paradise Hotel. And I watched that reality show. And I remember being so upset for him that the woman who he sort of helped get through the entire thing ended up turning on him in the end.
If you want the behind the scenes of that and how we met and came together from, we knew each other before that, but that is actually part of the longer part of our love story.
We're going to get into your love story because that's one of the first things I wanted to ask you about. So you did this amazing thing that got written up in the New York Times back in, I want to say 2006, where you and Dave wanted to have this really cool wedding. You wanted to have the people, like a lot of people around you who you love, family, all of that. But funds were an issue. And you decided to figure out how you could get your wedding sponsored. And this made the New York Times. This is sponsorship, like brand sponsorship, before in such an innovative, different way back in 2006, which I think is ultimately kind of what led you to Likeable and what you've done. But can you talk a little bit about where this idea came from to sponsor your wedding?
Well, since you mentioned Paradise Hotel, I'll go back. So Dave was the number one salesperson in the country at Radio Disney and worked in media sales. And I joined the team and I dropped him to number 2. We shared an office. There was a massive friendly competition. Like we were business besties.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I was married. I got married very young, 24 years old, a starter marriage. I spent a lot of money, of my parents' money, on a big wedding. And there was a lot of shame that I pretty quickly realized that this thing wasn't going to work. So that's like a side note for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we were competing against each other, very, very good friends. I was married, and so nothing ever happened there. And Dave was always looking for love. I used to set up his J-date profiles for him. Eventually, I ended up moving to New York with my husband. And he ended up really accelerating his search for love by going on this reality show called Paradise Hotel, which was sexy singles that came to like this island. And then they invited like normal people on the show. So like people who don't look like they just walked out of an equinox and are sprayed, tanned, and perfect and all of these. It's actually a really interesting premise for a show. So I was in New York, and by the time Dave went on that show, so some time had passed, I was already divorced. And I had a young baby. By the time I gave birth to her, I was already a single mom pretty much, very quickly. So I'm home with my baby, and I'm turn on the TV, and there's Dave, my old BFF from Radio Disney, who's looking for love on this show. It was like, I watched it. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I too felt very bad for him, but also thought he was so brilliant with how he navigated it. When he comes off the show, I was thinking, do I reach out to him? He's like famous now, whatever, in my mind, reality famous. He called me. And I was like, oh, by the way, I got divorced. And he was like, well, I'm in town next week to interview with agents in New York. Why don't we meet up for coffee? Turns out he was not meeting with agents in New York. He just flew in to see me. And we ended up, immediately getting together. And then we wanted to get married. But of course, Dave is like now this larger than life person, right? He's somebody who goes on a reality show, likes to be in the public eye. He wanted everyone he's ever known to come to his wedding. So I knew I wasn't going to ask my parents for money. Had so much shame from the first marriage. I had a child, so I wasn't going to invest in a wedding. Like, not, your priorities shift. And so we had to get creative. And we both came from a brand background. Both were sort of like out there, both worked in media sales. And so we thought to ourselves, what if we pitch the minor league affiliate of the New York Mets, the Brooklyn Cyclones, because it's a venue, and we buy out their sponsorship for the night, which would be very cheap because it's a minor league game. We resell in sponsors. So instead of like Pepsi tossing t-shirts into the audience, it'll be wedding themed, and 1-800-Flowers will toss bridal bouquets. It'll be cute and campy and adorable. We'll get married on the field after the game. We'll raise money for charity, and we'll pitch lots of press. Well, they thought we were crazy, but it did work. We raised $100,000 in sponsorships, $20,000 for the National MS Society, and most importantly for the sponsors, we got all of this press, not just the New York Times, but like ABC World News Tonight and CNBC on the Money and, national and international coverage everywhere. So in addition to marrying the love of my life, I had a real challenge there, which was that all of these sponsors came back to us and said, this was amazing. We would bet on you guys. Can you do it again? We weren't going to have a sponsored baby. Definitely not going to have a sponsored divorce. It was all like very new. And so we just started a company based on word of mouth marketing. And so we got married in 2006. In 2007, Facebook opened beyond the college market. And that is when Dave really made the key decision, which was that we are going to call ourselves a social media agency. We are going to lean into social media right now. We are going to do nothing else. That is how we became one of the world's first social media agencies.
And brilliant name, Likeable Media, really captured sort of that time when people were just learning about social. And, it's interesting because I remember that evolution quite a bit. And there were a few companies that really kind of got in there early, Buddy Media, like some of these guys who really kind of got in early, figured out how the Facebook piece worked.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit, because I think this is really interesting. Everyone is panicking right now about the potential ban on TikTok.
Of course.
Okay. For those of us who remember Vine, here one day, gone the next. And a lot of those people ended up becoming some of the big people on TikTok, right? Because the skills were transferable. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about the social platforms and how, by association, creators should think about them and brands as well?
I believe that social networks are a fantastic way to amplify your message, to potentially generate income. It's great, but you are living on rented land. And if
Mhm.
you want to create a long-term sustainable business from content creation, what you're going to need to do is capture those people however you can, whether it's through a newsletter, whether it's lead magnets, whatever it is, you need, I believe, to build beyond, certainly beyond one network,
Mhm.
and definitely beyond just being known for being on social media. It's essential. When I built Likeable, so we were really big experts in Facebook initially.
Mhm.
And that served us really well in the beginning, because in the beginning that was the only game in town.
Mhm.
But the pressure to, as different networks emerge, Instagram appears, TikTok appears, you have to be good at everything. And I do think if you're a creator, if that's your full-time thing, you have to really understand all the networks. It doesn't mean that you have to participate in all of them,
Mhm.
but I would say that it is essential to be as much diversified.
Right. How do you still think about blogs, email? Like, just curious on some of these things that are probably considered old school.
I don't think email is old school at all. I think when you're looking at email, it's still one of the highest performing platforms to use, and capturing a list for which you can add value to your community is fantastic. Blogs work for a number of reasons, depends on the category, depends on what you're doing, certainly in thought leadership. But a lot of blogs have turned into these elongated LinkedIn posts. And I think people's attention span has really shrunk. Our attention span has gotten so minuscule. Our ability to retain information or sit for longer periods of time. And a lot of that is due to our behaviors on mobile, right? And and listen, it's nobody's fault, but we have a lot less capacity to hold one major thing from a creator than we used to.
It's amazing to me when I talk to people and people of my generation who had a long time without having some of these social apps, and we're looking at each other going, when did we get ADD?
Everybody has a little bit of ADD now. Now, I will say, by the way, for blogs, like if you're looking at thought leadership for somebody in corporate, great.
Mhm.
If you're looking to optimize and answer questions for people at a deeper level, great. But I'd sooner see you have a lead magnet that does that. So I want to see sign up for your creator and say, sign up for my email to unlock the 5 ways that
Mhm.
I think now if people want to read longer content, they usually are willing to give you their email to read it if your content's good enough. And that is where I think the key is, because you
Mhm.
don't know what's going to happen with the social networks. Social networks have to be the introduction,
Mhm.
and they have to pull you in, and you have to be damn good at it.
Mhm.
But moving beyond that is essential.
Yeah. So when you think about the social platforms and Likeable. So Likeable started, as you said, you were kind of really figuring out Facebook, which at the time was the only real game in town. Maybe
For a
Twitter
long
was in there a
Yeah.
bit. For a long time, though, Facebook was it.
Mhm.
So how when you think about the social platforms and the evolution and how Likeable kind of had to ramp through not just Facebook, but then as new social platforms came in, what is there sort of an ethos that you have in terms of how you think about new social platforms as they come into the mix and how creators and brands should think about?
There were two strategies that I think were really important that you could choose of. One is I'm going to be first on everything, and I'm going to be loud, and I don't care if it's going to hit or not. I'm going to be on Be Real every day. I'm going to be everywhere. And then these things sort of go, and you're spreading yourself out because you're going to be first. That's one strategy. You have to have a lot of resources to do that, or you have to be a dedicated full-time content creator to do that just for yourself. The other strategy, we worked with mostly corporate clients, is to evaluate and look at the data. Who's on there? What's your strategy? Why do you deserve to interrupt people scrolling through pictures of their friends' babies and vacations. Like, as a brand, you're intruding in their space.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you can be beloved or interesting or add value or be funny or whatever it is, there's really no point in joining a network that you may not ever really have a sustainable strategy for. So generally, the way Likeable approached things was pretty holistic. Like, why are we there? How are we adding value? And if we're going on, we're not really in the like, oh, we're going to test this type.
Mm-hmm.
The only way we did that is when we were first on something. Like, if we wanted to be first on a new network, we would go and do something really outrageous and it would be a stunt and fun and we get a lot of coverage.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I mean, you see people like Duolingo do that all the time. But if you want to use social media to actually get a return or be thoughtful about it, and chances are you're not going to have the level of staff of a Duolingo, it's important to really be thoughtful and not just jump.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get on, it's like, are you going to get off? Really have to think about it.
Right. So, quality over kind of spreading yourself too thin across the platforms.
Yeah.
So you built Likeable up and made the decision that you wanted to sell the company.
Yeah.
What do you think was sort of that realization moment where you said, you know what, I've kind of done this. I'm ready for the next thing and I want to sell this company?
Dave and I started the company after the wedding. He was the CEO. I was the operator. I spoke to every client. I hired every person. I paid every bill. I did that. Dave was the face of the business. He was the thought leader. He was the visionary. He loved social media. I loved people and I loved operating and I loved running a business, but I wasn't really a social media person so much.
Mm-hmm.
So about 6 years in, because Dave's a visionary, he wanted to launch a software company, wanted to do a few other things. So Likeable was something that I stepped in to run. Now, in 2013, it was very different than 2007 because, number one, social media was no longer totally new. Number two, we had grown so fast. And when I tell you, like, there were no social media agencies in the beginning. So everybody came to us and we had no idea what we were doing. We sort of fumbled through and learned as we went and got really good. We were good at social media always, but the managing of clients and the figuring out how to run a business and like all of that was really hard when you're growing that quickly. Hiring people, cash flow. In that process, we were growing really quickly, but we weren't really that profitable yet. All the leaders that I saw in the space were very much like Dave or like a Gary Vaynerchuk. They were loud, they were extroverted, and they were male.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dave left to launch a couple of great new businesses. And here I am with something that's no longer new, that's not really profitable, and didn't feel like I was in my skin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really afraid. And then one of the things that I did in fumbling through this and learning is a couple things. First, I decided that I was going to build my network based on the collective power of women. So I started a podcast called All the Social Ladies. I started interviewing women at the brand level, and that allowed me to build my network. That then allowed me to double the business. So that was like how I was going to do this. Instead of telling my own story, I was going to tell other women's stories. That was first. The second thing I did was really decide that I wanted to create operations that would allow us to be profitable because this was going to be the business that was going to support our family. And I stumbled upon an amazing book called Built to Sell by John Warlow. It's all about a PR. It's a fable. It's an agency owner who works 20 years in his business, slaves over his business, works 24 hours a day. And then he's ready to sell. And he goes to a broker and they're like, yeah, you're worth nothing. And it's because it's entirely based on you. So I read the book and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I knew probably around like 2015, I was going to build it to sell, get it to a certain number. I wanted to get it healthy. And what I discovered in that process was that when you build a business to be a sellable business, you're building a business that you are no longer totally entrenched into a point where you can't breathe. I was able to find a lot of balance in that. In 2020, the pandemic hit, obviously. Social media became a major, major necessity because everybody was online and brands needed to comment on a lot of what was happening in the world. I was advising around the clock. I was tired and revenue was growing. And I felt like the other piece of this was I always stayed completely in social media. I never veered outside. because I wanted to be the best at what I did. And
Mhm.
I thought, I don't know how long in 2020 or 2021 there'll be a space for a social only agency. So maybe I need to build this to do more. And that was when I decided either I was going to acquire businesses or I was going to sell. The market was great. I decided to sign with an advisor, and I signed with an advisor in December of 2020. And in April 2021, we sold. It was
That's
very
amazing.
the market that at that time, the market was nuts. So it was also good timing.
Congratulations on the sale and hitting the right time. You never know. And that's all good. When you think about this idea that you had to focus on building this community or this building your network through the power of women,
Huh? Uh-huh.
how has that now translated to what you're doing with the Whisper Group? Because that is your new endeavor.
My new endeavor is the Whisper Group. Contrary to Likeable, which was really Dave's vision and Dave's passion, this is what I believe that I was born to do. And I'll tell you, once I started that podcast, which was really about adding value to women at the brand level, and then hopefully I build my network, I became fascinated by women's stories always. So I always thought that was interesting. But when I went through the sale process, one of the things that I discovered was there were very few women that I could talk to who had sold their businesses in this way and had had this type of exit or had experienced what I was going through, or women who sat in that room full of men who were questioning every bit of their business while they're going through a sale, navigating that. It's like
Mhm.
big stuff. And so I started looking into that. Like, was I the only woman that felt this way? And it turns out I wasn't. Then I started realizing that women capture only 0.8% of total exit value, which means of every dollar that is spent on an acquisition, women are capturing, 0.8% of that dollar. Okay. So less than a penny. so,
I mean, that's unbelievable.
so that's wild. So then I started thinking about why there is an unmet need here.
Mhm.
And so exit planning has existed for a long time. And like, as
Mhm.
I mentioned, I always recommend build to sell and all of these things. But what I wanted to do was start an exit readiness advisory practice specifically for women owned businesses. And then what I wanted to do was have them get advice from women who have actually been in their shoes. So I built a community of exited female founders, which I interview on my podcast, The Exit Whisperer. And then I match them with women in their vertical with a woman who's looking to think about her exit. And you don't have to be wanting to sell tomorrow. You just might want to understand like what you're valued at today and what you need to do to get to the number that you want to live the life you want.
Mhm.
And for me, the idea that I could help women who have built these incredible lifestyle businesses, including creator businesses, and help them turn them into life-changing assets, then I've accomplished my goal.
Well, I love that. And one of the things that I love about the creator space, and I've said this for years, is that I think what social media has done is it has given women an opportunity to build wealth through flexibility that we did not have before,
Yeah.
right? Before there was a corporate structure, you got onto that corporate wheel, and when your kid needed you to come to some event, you couldn't because you were flying internationally somewhere and you had to do it. That's just the way it was. And you either learned that you could operate in that environment and do that, or you decided, I'm going to be the master of my own destiny. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah.
I think a lot of today's creators and then female influencers, and we know that over 80% of influencers who are making money as influencers are women.
Mhm.
I think that is the number one thing that has attracted them to this space. And they then learn, okay, I can be really good at this, because a lot of what we are about as women is kind of sharing things that we love, sharing with and building community. So for me, there's so much clarity about why this is great for women. So let's talk a little bit about this. If we have creators who are listening to the show today, if a woman has built her brand, she's built her following, and she is building now products, she's got other ways she's monetizing besides like brand deals, which is still for creators, for influencers, the number one source of revenue is from brand deals. So we want to shift that so that women have other ways that they can monetize their audience. If you had to give a woman like that advice so that she could build her business, what would the advice be that you would give her?
Brand partnerships are fabulous. And I'm very happy that we are extracting some of the money that think about what these networks are making. The fact that you're getting anything from this is like, it's fantastic. But if you want to build something that's sustainable, I would encourage you to look at how can you create something. I always talk about when I'm creating income, I like to make my income red. It's recurring. So you know what you're going to make over the course of the year. And it's diversified. It's more than one thing. Think about what you can do to move those people off of the network, not just the brand deals, but like, what can you sell? It could be a product. It could be a masterclass. It could be, simple, quick things, quick webinar mastermind stuff that you do all the time. There's so many things. There's coaching. There's individual downloads of stuff. Like, what can you teach? What can you share? And then how do you get people to sign up for that? How do you use your influence to get people to sign up for that so that you're monetizing beyond the networks themselves? The networks should not be the primary source of monetization if you can. It really should be the lead gen to the primary source. When there are hundreds of millions of people on a network for free, they're the product. So that network can change anything at any time. You too are the product. So it should be used as a feeder to get them off of there to buy whatever it is that you care about.
So it's this idea that we were talking about earlier too, about having some way to not just rent this audience, but really to have some direct contact, whether that's an email address. People are doing this through Substacks. They're doing it through different ways so that they know who the audience is beyond just this is their profile and when they engage with my content.
Correct. And you're seeing the rise of this with tools like ManyChat, right? If you're looking at ManyChat, the entire existence of ManyChat is to help have autoresponders that drive people off of the networks. Like, comment this and I'll send you my guide.
Yep.
And it goes to, hello, enter your email, and it can all be automated. Even though it is saturated, I love that. I think it's done with purpose and it makes it easier for you. So like look to things like that will help you.
I want to talk very quickly, if you can, about your book, which is The Whisper Way. Can you share a little bit about what people might learn from the book and what inspired you to write it?
Oh my gosh. I love this book so much, and I hope you guys do too. It is a story similar to Build to Sell. I did it in a form where it's like a fable. So Whisper, just so you know, stands for the 7 tenets of what I believe needs to make a business sellable. It's your why, your how, your income, your secret sauce, your profitability, your exec team, and your roar factor, how you are going to present to that room full of men when they're ripping you apart. The book has a fable that is based on a woman who hosts a retreat, 7 different women who are all entrepreneurs, including a creator, who have different challenges in their business that are each linked to one of those 7 areas. And they workshop them and work on them, and it's about their relationships. And then there's an action guide, an implementation guide, where you can work on those 7 areas as well, which is really fun. I wrote the book in a 1-month period, I wrote a book before called Work It Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business. That was a long time. This poured out of me because I believe that it is what I am truly meant to do.
I love that. Well, I am excited about this new venture that you have. I can completely see how women can use what you're doing. What do you see as the next 18 months?
So over the next 18 months, my job is to help educate as many women business owners as possible that this is possible, that you can extract great wealth from all of the good things that are in your head and all of the blood, sweat, and tears that you do to build a business. You make money in the business, but at the end, you can really do a lot and have the freedom to do what's next. We talk about freedom and entrepreneurship all the time, but sometimes we feel trapped in our businesses too. It's really, and I know creators identify with that because you're a creator and it's fun and it's exciting and you start it to have freedom of time and then you feel like all this pressure to constantly produce. So
Mm-hmm.
my goal is to have you exit when you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah.
And so my next 18 months will be spent on growing this business. It will be spent on growing out the network of exited female founders. I will continue to grow my podcast and my book. And I will prepare the Whisper Group to be a business that is built to be able to exit when I want to and not when I have to.
One thing that I want to just have you kind of quickly talk a little bit about,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think this is one of the challenges with women who start businesses. I have just found in my experience with a lot of the creators that we work with and other women I know who have businesses, we get so emotionally attached
Uh-huh.
to the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? We get so emotionally attached to what we're building. I know so many women refer to their businesses as another child.
The baby. My business is my baby. Yeah.
Yes. So this is not an uncommon thing.
No.
I would love if you could just talk a little bit to women who may be in this position about how to think about exit when they have this emotional attachment to the business.
First of all, I will say there is an emotional attachment. It is very challenging when you have put your blood, sweat, and tears, your heart, your soul into a business, and then it is no longer yours.
Mm-hmm.
Very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I would say is that I would liken the attachment to a home or a childhood home. Your home contains so many memories. You put, as a woman, especially, like I put my heart and soul into building that home. But it's really about the memories that are created inside that home that make the home what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The home is a shell. We sell our homes. We move on to the next thing. And generally, when we sell our homes, if we did a good job, we're going to make a good amount of money to go to the next thing that we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage you to think of your business like a home,
Mm-hmm.
something that is long-term. It's something that helps you learn and grow. So many amazing things happen in that home. And then a point comes where you're ready to go to a new home.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that home is on the beach, and sometimes that home is another home just like the one you did before. It can be lots of different things, but I would encourage you to think, because if I said to you, you can't have an emotional attachment to your home, you would think it was crazy. Everybody has some form of emotional attachment to their home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's normal. Same thing with a business, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
your actual baby. Like
Right.
the business afforded you the life to be able to
Mm-hmm.
have the babies that you want.
Well, I think that's great advice. If people want to follow you and learn more about what you're doing, what is the best way for them to do that?
Okay, well, since you're all creators, I'm going to tell you to follow me individually at Carrie Kerpen, because I'm in this creator space as a solopreneur where I'm getting all of my messages out about exit planning, about my life, about all of it. And I really, please, if you're on here listening, give me a comment, give me a like. This stuff is hard, you guys. I mean, it's working, but it's hard. It's hard to put yourself out there. So Carrie
Mm-hmm.
Kerpen. If you want to know about the disparities between men and women's founded businesses, go to closetheexitgap.com. And if you're interested in the Whisper Group, you can go to wearethewhispergroup.com.
Carrie Kerpen, thank you for spending this time with us and sharing all these insights.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@SheSpeaks.com. Until next time.